Hands behind your head.
Officer, I'm loading my groceries.
Do it now.
I'm showing you my receipt.
Turn around.
Wait.
Against the car.
Easy.
Stay still.
That sauce from the jar. It's not what you think.
The afternoon sun hung high and bright over the sprawling asphalt expanse of the Oak Creek Plaza. It was a Tuesday just past 2 o'clock, the kind of crisp, clear day that usually promises nothing more eventful than errands and school pickups. The parking lot was a patchwork of glistening metal and painted lines, roughly 60% full. It was the rhythm of suburbia in motion. A mother wrestled a stubborn stroller into the back of a minivan while her toddler watched, clutching a stuffed rabbit. An older gentleman, perhaps in his 80s, moved with slow, determined steps toward the pharmacy entrance, leaning heavily on a cane. The air smelled of exhaust fumes and the faint, sweet scent of dryer vents from the nearby laundromat. Somewhere in the distance, a car alarm wailed, a rhythmic, piercing siren that no one paid attention to, before cutting out abruptly, restoring the low hum of traffic and distant conversation. If you were to check the digital timestamp on the body camera footage that would soon become national news, it would read 14:18:05. Standing at the rear of a pristine pearl-white SUV, Marcus Sterling was engaged in the mundane architecture of domestic life. He was loading groceries, but even in this simple act, there was a precision to him that hinted at a life defined by order. He placed 2 heavy, reusable canvas bags into the cargo space with deliberate care, ensuring they sat flush against the back seat so they wouldn't slide during the drive. He adjusted a carton of almond milk. He double-checked the position of a fragile bag containing glass jars. In his left hand, folded once lengthwise, was a long slip of thermal paper, his receipt. It was a habit ingrained over 25 years of professional life. Document every expense, track every interaction, keep the record straight. Marcus looked nothing like a man who had popped out for a quick milk run. He was dressed in a navy blue bespoke suit, the fabric catching the light with a subtle sheen that whispered of high-quality Italian wool. His white dress shirt was crisp, the collar unbuttoned to reveal a sliver of dark skin, his silk tie loosened just enough to suggest the workday was winding down, but not over. He had come straight from the grand marble halls of the towering law firm downtown, Sterling and Vance, the firm he had helped build into a powerhouse of corporate litigation. His briefcase, a weathered but expensive leather satchel, was already resting on the back seat. His wallet, containing his platinum credit cards and his state bar identification, was tucked into his jacket pocket. Next to it sat a sleek metal case holding his business cards. Marcus Sterling was 52 years old. He had spent 10 years as a bureau chief in the district attorney's office, prosecuting complex financial crimes and public corruption. He was a man who knew the penal code better than he knew the lyrics to his favorite songs. He knew the difference between reasonable suspicion and probable cause not just as abstract concepts, but as the rigid, unyielding walls that defined his profession. In the courtroom, he was known for a terrifying calmness, a demeanor that never cracked, regardless of the chaos erupting around him. On Saturdays, he didn't bill hours. Instead, he drove his luxury SUV to a community center in the disenfranchised South Ward, where he taught a workshop called The Law and You. He taught teenagers how to survive encounters with authority. He taught them to articulate their rights without handing over their dignity. He taught them that anger, while justified, was a luxury they could not afford in the heat of the moment. Before we see what happens next, take a moment to ask yourself, if you saw this man, impeccably dressed, methodically packing groceries into a luxury car, what would you assume about him? And more importantly, why does our assumption matter so much? If you appreciate stories that peel back the layers of our justice system, please make sure you're subscribed, because we are about to dissect a moment where the system collided with itself. The patrol cruiser entered the lot from the Eastern Access Road. It wasn't patrolling, it was hunting. The vehicle, a black and white Interceptor, was moving significantly faster than the posted 10-mile-per-hour limit, the suspension dipping as it cornered sharply around a landscaped island. The move forced a delivery truck to slam on its brakes, the driver throwing a hand up in frustration. The cruiser didn't slow down. It surged forward, cutting diagonally across empty parking spaces, bypassing the marked lanes entirely. Inside, Officer Bradley Finch gripped the steering wheel with white-knuckled intensity. Finch was 27 years old, with 4 years on the force. He was known in the precinct as eager, sometimes too eager. He had a history of proactive policing, a euphemism that in his file covered a prior complaint for aggressive language that had been dismissed after a swift internal review. Finch slammed the gear shift into park before the car had completely ceased its forward momentum. The cruiser rocked on its springs. The driver's door flew open. Finch stepped out, and the body camera on his chest began to tell the story. The audio engaged immediately, capturing the ragged, adrenaline-fueled sound of his breathing. It was the breathing of a man in a foot chase, not a man walking up to a shopper. His hand dropped instinctively to the taser holstered on his hip. In his other hand, he held a heavy tactical flashlight, thumbing it on despite the glaring afternoon sun. He marched across the asphalt, covering the 30 feet between them in seconds. His posture was coiled, aggressive, projecting the immediate threat of violence. There was no threat. There was only Marcus Sterling, turning from his trunk to see a police officer storming toward him. "Step away from the vehicle! Hands behind your head! Now!" Finch barked, his voice cracking slightly with intensity. Marcus froze. He still held a grocery bag in his right hand, a loaf of artisan bread, and some fruit. Confusion washed over his face, but it was instantly replaced by the cool, analytical mask of a veteran litigator. He didn't drop the bag. He didn't run. He didn't shout. He simply set the bag down into the trunk with deliberate slowness, making sure the officer could see his hands were empty. "Officer, I am loading my groceries," Marcus said. His voice was a rich baritone, steady and level. He raised his left hand, the white strip of the receipt fluttering between his index and middle fingers. "My receipt is right here. If you look at the timestamp, you'll see I just left the store." "I said hands behind your head. Do it now." Finch closed the gap. He was now within striking distance. "I am complying," Marcus said, turning slowly so his back was to the officer. His hands raised well above his shoulders, the receipt still clearly visible. "But you need to tell me why I am being detained. These are groceries. I have the proof of purchase in my hand." "We have a report," Finch shouted, reaching out. "Suspect matches your description, shoplifting high-end electronics from the big box store." "Matches my description?" Marcus asked calmly, even as the officer grabbed his wrist. "Which is what? A black man in a suit?" Finch didn't answer. Instead, he lunged. The body camera footage jerked violently as Finch grabbed Marcus's right arm and twisted it behind his back. He didn't guide Marcus to the car. He threw him. Marcus was spun around and slammed chest first against the open trunk of his own SUV. The sound was sickening, a heavy, dull thud of a human body hitting reinforced steel. Inside the trunk, the carefully packed bags shifted. There was a sharp, wet crunch as a glass jar of marinara sauce shattered inside one of the canvas totes. Red sauce began to seep through the fabric, dripping slowly onto the pristine bumper. "Stop resisting!" Finch yelled, though Marcus had not moved a muscle to resist. "I am not resisting," Marcus stated, his face pressed against the cold metal of the trunk lid. "I am remaining perfectly still. You are using excessive force on a compliant citizen." "Shut up." Finch grabbed Marcus's other wrist. The receipt, which Marcus had held onto like a shield, slipped from his fingers. It drifted down, twisting in the light breeze, and landed on the gray asphalt near the rear tire. It lay there, white and stark against the dark ground, ignored. The handcuffs came out. The metallic ratchet sound cut through the ambient noise of the parking lot. Click, click, click. Finch tightened them aggressively, the metal biting into the soft skin of Marcus's wrists. "You're being detained for investigation of theft," Finch panted. "You fit the profile." "What profile?" Marcus asked, his voice strained but unbroken. "What specific clothing description were you given? What height? What weight?" Finch didn't answer. He couldn't answer. He pressed his forearm into the middle of Marcus's back, pinning him against the car. The body camera angle looked down at the back of Marcus's head, capturing the expensive weave of his suit jacket bunching up, the way his polished dress shoes were planted firmly, widely apart, in a pose of absolute non-aggression. "Officer," Marcus said, speaking clearly for the benefit of the recording device he knew was rolling. "My receipt is on the ground by your left boot. It shows I purchased $60 of groceries 12 minutes ago. It exonerates me immediately. Pick it up." Finch looked down. The camera briefly captured the receipt, but Finch didn't bend over. He didn't check. He kicked it slightly aside as he shifted his stance. "We'll see what you've got on you," Finch sneered. "You do not have consent to search my person," Marcus said instantly. "You have no probable cause for arrest. Therefore, a search incident to arrest is unlawful. You are violating my Fourth Amendment rights." "You're a lawyer or something?" Finch scoffed, his tone dripping with mockery. "Yeah, everyone's a lawyer when they get caught." Without permission, Finch began to pat down the pockets of the navy suit. His gloved hands were rough, invading the personal space of a man who had spent decades commanding respect in the highest courts of the state. Finch reached into the inner breast pocket. He pulled out a sleek smartphone, the screen lighting up with notifications, emails from partners, a calendar reminder for a charity gala, a text from his daughter asking about dinner. Finch ignored it and shoved it onto the trunk ledge. Next, he pulled out the leather wallet. It was worn soft with age, the stitching impeccable. Finch opened it, thumbing past the platinum credit cards, the health insurance card, the folded cash. Then he found the leather card case. It was embossed with gold lettering. Finch flipped it open. Inside, behind a clear plastic window, was a laminated card with a holographic seal. It wasn't a driver's license. It was a State Bar Association identification card. It listed the holder's name, Marcus A. Sterling, Esq. Status, active member in good standing. Below it was a secondary card, an ID from his time at the district attorney's office, kept as a memento, but still looking very official. The movement on the body camera stopped. The heavy breathing that had dominated the audio track suddenly hitched. There was a pause. 1 second, 2 seconds, 3 seconds. A silence that screamed, You're an attorney, Finch said. The mockery was gone. In its place was a sudden, creeping coldness. I am a senior partner at Sterling & Vance, Marcus replied, his face still pressed against his car. I served as a bureau chief for the district attorney for 10 years. I've prosecuted police officers for exactly what you are doing right now. The color seemed to drain from the footage itself. Finch's hand, still holding the wallet, began to tremble ever so slightly. Look, I just got a call, Finch stammered, taking a half step back, easing the pressure on Marcus's spine. There was no call that described me, Marcus said, and now you have a crowd. It was true. The parking lot, once a background of indifference, had transformed. A woman with a shopping cart had stopped 20 feet away, her phone held high, the red recording light visible. A delivery driver in a brown uniform was standing by his truck, also filming. A group of teenagers had paused on their skateboards, watching silently. Hey! The woman with the phone yelled out. He didn't do anything. I saw him come out of the store with those bags. Back up! Finch yelled, pointing a shaking finger at her. This is an active investigation. It is an active violation of civil rights, Marcus corrected him, turning his head to look directly into the camera lens on Finch's chest. The sun caught the side of his face, illuminating a small abrasion on his cheek where it had hit the trunk. His eyes were hard, intelligent, and absolutely fearless. Officer, Marcus said, his voice dropping to a conversational volume that was somehow more terrifying than a scream. You have detained me without reasonable suspicion. You ignored exculpatory evidence that was literally in my hand. You used excessive force on a cooperative subject. You conducted an illegal search, and you have done all of this on camera. I needed to verify. Finch tried to argue, but the fight had left him. You verified nothing. You assumed everything. Marcus cut him off. My name is Marcus Sterling, and you have just made the biggest mistake of your career. Finch stood there, the wallet burning a hole in his hand. He looked at the receipt on the ground. He looked at the smashed jar of sauce leaking red fluid like a mock crime scene in the trunk. He looked at the witnesses. At that moment, a second cruiser rolled up. No lights, no sirens. It parked calmly 2 spots away. Sergeant Elena Rossi stepped out. Rossi was a veteran. She had 18 years on the force, short gray hair, and eyes that missed nothing. She didn't run. She walked with the weary, deliberate pace of someone who had spent 2 decades cleaning up messes. She took in the scene in a single sweep. The well-dressed man handcuffed against a luxury car, the spilled groceries, the crowd filming, the receipt on the ground, and Officer Finch looking like a child who had broken a priceless vase. Officer Finch, Rossi said, her voice sharp. Status, Sarge, He matched a description, Finch said, his voice climbing an octave. Suspect in an electronics theft. What electronics? Rossi asked, stepping closer. Which store? The big box one, Finch mumbled. Did you confirm the call with dispatch? Rossi asked. Silence. Did you? I heard it over the radio. I thought... There was no call confirmed, Marcus said. He had turned fully around now, leaning back against his car, the handcuffs glinting. There is no description that matches me, and the receipt for these groceries has been blowing around on the asphalt for 5 minutes. Rossi looked at the ground. She bent her knees, picking up the slip of paper. She read the timestamp. She read the itemized list. Almond milk, artisan bread, pasta sauce, fresh fruit. Total $62.14. Time, 14:15. She looked up at Finch. The look she gave him was withering. It was a look of profound disappointment and immediate damage control. What else? Rossi asked, gesturing to the items in Finch's hands. Finch held out the leather case. Rossi took it. She saw the name. She saw the firm. She closed her eyes for a brief second, exhaling a long breath through her nose. "You handcuffed Marcus Sterling," she whispered, not really asking. "I didn't know who he was," Finch pleaded. "That," Rossi said, "is exactly the problem. You didn't ask." She turned to Marcus. "Sir, I apologize. We're going to get these off you right now." "Officer Finch will remove them," Marcus said coldly. "And then I want his badge number, his supervisor's name, which I assume is you, and the incident report number immediately." "I'll handle the uncuffing personally, sir," Rossi said, reaching for her key. "No," Marcus insisted. "He put them on. He can take them off." Rossi nodded once, a sharp military motion. She stepped back. "Finch, key. Now." Finch stepped forward, his hands fumbling. It took him 2 tries to get the key into the mechanism. The cuffs sprang open. Marcus brought his hands forward. He rubbed his wrists, where angry red welts were already forming against his dark skin. He didn't say a word. He simply adjusted his cufflinks, smoothed the sleeves of his jacket, and straightened his tie. He picked up his wallet and phone from the trunk ledge. He checked the phone screen. No cracks. He placed them into his pockets. Then he turned to the trunk. He picked up the bag with the shattered jar. Sauce dripped onto his polished shoes. He didn't flinch. He placed the bag into the trunk, closing the lid with a solid thump. "I will be requesting the preservation of all footage," Marcus said, looking from Finch to Rossi. "Body cameras, dash cameras, and the precinct dispatch logs. If a single second of audio is missing, I will add spoliation of evidence to the federal complaint." "Everything will be preserved, Mr. Sterling," Rossi said. She sounded tired. "You have my word." "Your word is appreciated, Sergeant," Marcus said, pulling a business card from his case and handing it to her. "But I prefer evidence. This is a pivotal moment in our story. The physical danger has passed, but the legal danger for Officer Finch is just beginning. It makes you wonder, how many times has a receipt been ignored because the person holding it didn't know the penal code? How many times does the story end at the handcuffs? Let me know in the comments. Do you think Marcus's background is the only reason this didn't end in tragedy? The investigation began before the sun had even set. Internal Affairs was notified within the hour. The video footage was pulled, tagged, and locked in a digital server that logged every access attempt. The footage was damning. It showed a complete lack of reasonable suspicion. There was no theft report that matched Marcus. The description Finch claimed to have heard was a vague chatter about a male in a dark jacket near a completely different mall 3 miles away. Finch had extrapolated that into a specific suspect, driven by bias and a hunger for action. The report Finch filed 3 hours later was a work of fiction. He wrote that the suspect was acting furtively, attempting to flee, and reaching for his waistband. He claimed the receipt was never shown. He claimed the force used was necessary to secure a non-compliant subject, but the camera doesn't blink. And in this case, the camera was the prosecutor's best witness. The district attorney's office, the very office where Marcus had once led the bureau, found itself in a crisis. They had to recuse every prosecutor who knew Marcus personally, which was half the senior staff. They brought in a special prosecutor from a neighboring county to avoid any claim of favoritism. But they didn't need favors. They had the facts. Officer Bradley Finch was charged with official misconduct, assault in the 3rd degree, filing a false instrument, and civil rights violations. The criminal trial was a spectacle. It lasted 5 days. The courtroom was packed. Marcus took the stand on the 3rd day. He didn't play the victim, he played the expert. He walked the jury through the encounter, dissecting Finch's actions against the department's own patrol guide. He explained the case law regarding Terry stops. He explained the 4th Amendment. He was brilliant, clinical, and devastating. The jury deliberated for 4 hours, guilty on all counts. At the sentencing hearing, the judge, a woman who had presided over hundreds of cases, looked down at Bradley Finch. Finch stood alone, stripped of his uniform, wearing a cheap suit that didn't fit. "You were given a badge," the judge said, her voice echoing in the silent courtroom. "You were given the power to deprive citizens of their liberty, and you used that power to terrorize a man simply because he existed in a space you decided he didn't belong in. You ignored the evidence of your own eyes to satisfy the prejudice in your mind." Finch was sentenced to 5 years in state prison. His law enforcement certification was permanently revoked. His name was added to the National Registry of Decertified Officers, ensuring he would never carry a badge or a gun again. But the criminal case was only half the battle. The civil suit filed by Sterling and Vance against the city was a masterclass in litigation. They didn't just sue for damages, they sued for systemic negligence. They pulled the training records. They pulled the supervision logs. They showed a pattern of ignoring complaints against officers like Finch. The city's lawyers watched the video in a high-rise conference room. They saw the smashed groceries, They saw the receipt fluttering in the wind. They saw the terrified faces of the witnesses. They saw a senior partner at a top law firm being slammed against a luxury car. They knew they couldn't win. A jury would destroy them. The settlement was reached 4 months later, $8.5 million. It was one of the largest individual payouts for a civil rights violation in the state's history. But Marcus Sterling didn't buy a boat. He didn't retire to an island. Standing on the steps of the federal courthouse, flanked by his legal team, Marcus addressed a sea of microphones. The wind whipped at his tie. A different tie, but the same impeccable composure. This settlement is not a lottery win, Marcus told the press. It is a penalty. It is a tax on injustice, but money does not fix the broken trust. He announced the creation of the Sterling Initiative, a scholarship fund for law students from underrepresented communities. He poured millions into the community center where he volunteered, expanding the Law and You program to 3 other districts. And then came the legislation. Leveraging his political connections and the public outrage from the viral video, Marcus helped draft the Sterling Act. The law was simple but revolutionary. It mandated the immediate public release of body camera footage in any incident involving allegations of racial profiling or excessive force. No more months of delays. No more ongoing investigation excuses. If you claim misconduct, the public gets to see the tape within 72 hours. The city council passed it unanimously. They had no choice. The image of the receipt on the ground had become a symbol too powerful to ignore. Officer Finch is currently serving his time in a correctional facility 200 miles away. He spends his days in a cell, stripped of authority, a prisoner of the very system he used to abuse others. Sergeant Elena Rossi was promoted to lieutenant. She now runs the department's training division, using the footage of the Sterling incident as the primary case study for what not to do. Every cadet watches it. Every cadet sees the moment the bar card is revealed. Every cadet learns that the man in the parking lot might just be the man who wrote the laws they are sworn to uphold. Marcus Sterling still shops at Oak Creek Plaza. He still drives a pearl white SUV. He still tracks his expenses with receipts. Months after the incident, during one of his Saturday workshops, a teenager raised his hand. "Mr. Sterling," the boy asked, "were you scared?" The room went quiet. Marcus looked at the young faces looking up at him. He adjusted his glasses, thinking back to the cold metal of the trunk and the crushing weight on his spine. "I wasn't scared," Marcus said softly. "I was prepared. Fear is a reaction. Preparation is a weapon. I knew who I was. I knew what the law said. And I knew that as long as I kept my composure, the truth would eventually win." He paused, leaning forward. "But remember this. The system didn't save me because it is perfect. It saved me because I forced it to work. I had the evidence, I had the witnesses, and I had the endurance to see it through. That is why we are here today. Not to learn how to be lucky, but to learn how to be undeniable." Marcus Sterling's story ended with a victory, but it serves as a haunting reminder. It reminds us that justice often depends on who is holding the receipt and who is willing to look at it. As we close this chapter, I want to ask you, what would you have done? If you were in that parking lot, would you have intervened? Would you have filmed? And if you were Marcus, would you have settled, or would you have taken the city to trial just to make a point? The line between a free citizen and a suspect is often drawn in the blink of an eye, based on nothing more than a bias and a badge. It's up to us to keep watching, keep recording, and keep demanding that the receipt be read. If you found this story compelling and want to see more deep dives into the real-world application of law and justice, please hit that subscribe button. We have many more stories to tell, and the truth is always stranger and more important than fiction. Thank you for watching, and stay safe out there.